The Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, is, as we speak, putting the finishing touches on a budget speech in which he will promise cost of living relief to all Australians. In what is likely to be the Albanese government's last budget before the next election, the Treasurer is walking the line between keeping inflation down and providing assistance for those doing it tough. And while the budget forecasts the first back-to-back surplus in close to 20 years, Jim Chalmers says it comes on top of, not at the expense of, those measures. It is a highly anticipated budget. We're expecting to hear from the Treasurer later this morning. Let's start with what we know and bring in political reporter Tom Lowry on this vaguely chilly morning at Parliament House in Canberra. Tom, good morning to you.
Good morning, Michael.
So how significant is this second surplus, this back-to-back surplus?
Look, it's certainly rare and it'll certainly be a cause for political celebration. This is just the first back-to-back surplus in 20 years, but it's also not the most significant number that the public and economists and the Reserve Bank are going to be keeping an eye on. This is, of course, still an inflation budget. Those are the numbers people are going to be watching. $9.3 billion as a budget surplus is something to celebrate, but the government will be much more concerned about what this budget means for that inflation rate and interest rates down the track.
Yes, the RBA board closely watching what Jim Chalmers will announce tonight or not announce. Let's turn to the suggestion the deficits in the out years will be bigger than those forecast in the mid-year economic update in December.
Yeah, this year is looking better than expected with that $9.3 billion, but the next 3 years after this are looking more of a cause for concern. More significant budget deficits than what was expected as of the last MyEFO. And we don't know the exact numbers, but expecting a relatively substantial upgrade there to those budget deficits. That is, again, a concern when it comes to inflation. It's not this year's budget, the 2023-24 budget, that the RBA is worried about. It's the 2024-25, the year to come. That's the numbers Michelle Bullock's going to be looking at, and the government too, as they look towards the next election.
Yeah, it's a question of whether, if they are bigger deficits, the government will be flicking the switch to stimulatory budgets too soon, with the inflation challenge still facing the RBA board. Tom, we'll chat to you over the course of the morning. Thank you. So a very big morning coming up. Lisa, Emma, good morning to you. We'll be hearing from the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, as he arrives at Parliament House later in the show. We'll also speak to the Shadow Finance Minister, Jane Hume, and Kate Chaney, one of the independent MPs, to get their respective views on Budget 2024.
Yes, and good morning to you, Michael, as well. Jim Chalmers will be pretty happy with a lot of the front pages this morning. They're certainly giving him the benefit of the doubt, I guess, as what he might be able to deliver tonight. There's a lot of pressure on it. As you said, an election in the offing at some stage.
Yes, lots of pressure. Depending on the timing next year, the Treasurer, the Prime Minister, could squeeze in another early budget if he was going to go all the way to May. But for all intents and purposes, as you know, Lisa, budgets are just as much political documents as they are economic documents, and the Treasurer will be looking at the next election very closely as he steps up at Parliament House tonight.
Looking forward to your coverage throughout the morning, Michael. Stay warm.
Well, let's go to other news now. New South Wales is bringing in tougher bail rules and ankle monitors as it looks to tackle the worst domestic violence offenders. Reporter Jessica Rendell has the details in Sydney. Jess, good morning. So can you take us through what the government is proposing here?
Well, Emma, these are some pretty strong changes that the Minns government is hoping to make. Essentially, what they want to do is put serious domestic violence offences in the same category as murder by reversing the presumption of bail. The government hopes that this will make it easier for prosecutors to keep alleged offenders behind bars while they challenge a magistrate's decision to grant them bail. So essentially what this means is the onus will now be on alleged offenders to prove why they should be released from custody instead of the current process, which is where the onus is on prosecutors to convince a magistrate why they should remain behind bars. Now, this reverse presumption of bail is currently only reserved for people accused of murder, of child sex abuse and of commercial-scale drug production. So some pretty strong changes that we are seeing there in that space, but this will only be reserved for those who commit serious domestic violence offences, and those are offences that are punishable by up to 14 years in jail bail and include things like sexual assault, strangulation with the intent to commit a further offence, as well as kidnapping. Coercive control will also be included, and this is set to be a criminal offence from the 1st of July. Now, some other changes that the government are hoping to make is to allow magistrates to make decisions surrounding bail instead of registrars, and also for police to make it easier for them to prosecute, easier for them to prosecute people who spy on their partners.
Jess, we have all heard some of these horrible statistics this year, but some new statistics now have come out, and these are really alarming. Can you take us through these numbers?
These are some pretty alarming statistics indeed, Emma. We are seeing that domestic violence offending in New South Wales is currently at an all-time high. Now, the latest quarterly custody statistics reports shows that there are more than 3,000 adults that are currently in custody for domestic violence offending. These numbers come from the Bureau of Crime Statistics and Research, and they say that these numbers are 64% higher than the numbers that we were seeing around 4 years ago. So I think it's quite evident that change is much needed in this space, and no doubt the Minns government will be hoping for support from the Parliament when they introduce these new laws later today.
Jess Rendell, thank you. Now, we know this can raise a lot of issues, this topic, for a lot of people, so you can get help. This is the number to call. It's the National Sexual Assault, Domestic and Family Violence Counselling Service, 1800 RESPECT. That's 1800 737 732.
Let's have a look at what else is happening in the news today. And former military lawyer David McBridge will learn today if he'll be jailed by the ACT Supreme Court for sharing classified military material with journalists. Mr McBridge pleaded guilty to 3 charges of stealing and unlawfully sharing classified military material, including documents used in the ABC's Afghan Files series, which exposed allegations of unlawful killings by Australian soldiers. The prosecution has asked for a substantial jail term.
Tasmania's Parliament will sit for the first time since the election today, with a minority Liberal government needing the support of 4 crossbenchers to pursue its agenda. The first step will be a vote on who should be Speaker of the House.
A historic agreement between the Dja Dja Wurrung people in central Victoria and an active mining corporation has been reached after 7 years of negotiations. The traditional owners of the land will now have some influence on the Fosterville gold mine during its operation and after it closes. Money from the gold mine will be given to the Dja Dja Wurrung Aboriginal clans, but detail on how much is yet to be made public.
An investigation is underway after a driverless train operated by mining giant Rio Tinto derailed in the Pilbara in WA. The autonomous train carrying iron ore crashed into a set of stationary train wagons about 80 kilometres out of Karratha. The National Rail Safety Regulator will investigate the incident, while Rio Tinto says work to clear the rail line will begin soon.
Let's have a look at the global markets, and not a lot of activity on the Dow today, just down ever so slightly. The Aussie dollar sitting at 66.1 US cents. Gold down as well. Brent crude up